Let's go. It is time. The time has come. Lights out for the hour. The hour of the time. It's now. I'm putting my gloves on. Could have done that before I started the show. If you are not watching live, if you're coming in later, you're going to want to jump forward a few minutes. You probably know the deal unless this is your first time here. If you are here live, I will be looking at the chat in 1 second. 1 segundo, as they say, across the ocean. I just have to get that link. That YouTube link. I think I figured out how to not have to do this every time, but it's kind of a little bit of a ritual now. Posting the link in the tweet. Oof, the tweet is way too long. I am editing the tweet live on the air. Perfect. I had the word through. I made it THRU and got rid of the too many characters. Hold on literally 1 second. Boom. It hath been tweetedeth. What's up, guys? What's up? Move some windows around. Shukia is here. Tyler Prime is here. K. Stopton Leal is here. That's a cool name, actually. How's it going, guys? Welcome to the pre-show, where I am still slightly setting up, but it's part of the casual charm of the show. Actually, I got everything pretty much set up over here, honestly. Some weeks I'm like running in and I have no idea what's going on, but it's going pretty well over here. I feel really good about doing the show right now. Actually, I was training my dog, and we had a really negative experience. It's not really relevant what happened, but it was very negative, and it put me in a bad mood, to be completely honest with you. I'm normally so chipper. I'm normally so buoyant. They say I have the happy-go-lucky idiot energy. Thank God. But it quite depressed me. But then I came back, and I was setting up, and I checked my DMs, and someone sent me a really nice DM. They were like, hey, man, I've been having a really hard time, and I read this thing you wrote. I was looking at your art. It really helped me out, cheered me up, and I said, that's epic. I said, that's literally so epic. I don't know how to respond, so I didn't respond yet. If that person's here, what's up? But it made me feel really good about what I do. So that kind of cheered me up. It's an epic story, right? Had a really good beginning, middle, and end. What's up, guys? Nice. RKD is here. Congratulations, man. People are saying congrats on the baby. Yes. It is baby edition. I should have made a baby edition. I didn't make a baby edition, but I should have. Yeah, man, it's nuts, dude. Yeah, I'm having a baby. I have successfully reproduced. Everyone's posting about future of the civilization. Everyone's posting about decline of X, Y, and Z. And I said, you know what? I saw one too many memes. I'm going to step up to the plate. I have to do something about it. And I did. I have single-handedly averted the numerical collapse of the civilization by reproducing. I know. Basically, I'm a hero. I mean, where's my medal over here? I'm just playing around. No, man, it's really cool actually. Thanks. Everyone's saying epic in the chat. Thanks, guys. That's really dope. Yeah, it's a really good pre-show topic. Yeah, man. Honestly, there's so many things I want to say about it. It's really interesting. You know, I usually try not to Facebook post on the show, but at the same time, things in my life are naturally relevant to the questions that arise, the different cues, the different lenses that we see things through. And it's really interesting because I've wanted to talk about it for so long on the show. I think 1 week I almost mentioned it, and I was like, oh, I really can't yet. And some people in the chat were like, it sounds like you're having a kid, but I didn't respond. But anyway, man, let's talk about it for a few minutes, and then we'll pull the trigger on the show. But yeah, it's really crazy because honestly, we have people of all different ages that are part of the scene. That's kind of the cool part of it, I guess. And I'm almost right in the middle, I guess. You know, I'm definitely not the youngest class or part of the younger. There's people who are older than me. You know, I'm kind of right in the middle in a way, depending on how you measure it. And it's interesting because I was thinking about it, and I thought the process that I went through, wondering if I was going to have a kid or not, was sort of interesting because that's a huge meme in the analysis of the society. Like people, oh, we should wait until it's perfect to have kids, and then all of a sudden you're like 50 years old and you didn't have kids or something. That's like the caricature of it. And I was like, yeah, I really don't want to be like that. At the same time, I really don't have my life together. So I don't know what to do, I guess. And I got to a certain point where I just kind of felt, well, first of all, so it's a theological show. We can talk nitty gritty about certain spiritual matters. Sometimes people watch the show with their kids, or maybe they're joking. But if they do, just 1 second. Although maybe they should hear this, but not if they're too little. But honestly, I got to a point where spiritually, I did feel kind of weird about using birth control, to be totally honest with you. Not that I was taking birth control, but you know what I'm talking about. I got kind of weird. I felt kind of weird about it, and I started thinking about it a lot. And I started to get really resentful almost of like, I hate that I'm in this time period where like I have to choose to have a kid and it's not, in the hands of God and the natural situation. And I started to resent that a little bit. And I started thinking about it all the time, honestly. Not all the time, but I mean, it started coming up in my mind a lot as like an issue. And I started feeling bad about it in a way. I guess I was thinking about it a lot. So eventually, I just stopped doing that. I mean, I'm being really real with you guys. We're all hanging out here, so I'm just going to be real with you guys. So eventually I stopped doing that. And then I kind of had these like panicky few weeks where I was like, yo, am I really going to have a kid? Like, this is insane. And the first few times I totally like panicked about it for a while. I was like, wow, like maybe that was a bad idea. I really can't tell. And then nothing happened, so it's kind of like playing with fire for a while, if you know what I'm saying. And I was like, well, we'll see what happens, I guess. And then eventually I pulled back really hard. I was like, okay, whoa, this is crazy. Like if I have a kid, like my whole life's going to change. Like this is nuts. And I really had to like reevaluate it in my mind. And I feel like I stared really long down the barrel of, well, I really could just never have kids. I mean, I could do that, and I really looked at that option. Not that I would do that, but, you got to think about all your options if you're being philosophically honest with yourself. I was like, I really could just not have a kid. I mean, I could be one of those people. I have a pretty cool life, and I looked down that road really hard. And I also had to think about that because what if we couldn't, like, conceive a kid? I had to, like, think about it. And I looked down there long enough and I was like, I feel 100% confident I shouldn't do that. And then I was like, whatever, man, I'm just going to see what happens. And now my wife is pregnant. So that's the whole story. But it was really interesting because there really was like a spiritual component to it, to be honest with you. I thought it was interesting because I talked about it a little bit on like a Patreon post a while ago, but part of the process of like getting more into Christianity, I'll put it that way, is this divinization of different aspects of life. Whereas before, I like to use the Buddhism analogy. I really was in that mode of like Buddha in a cave. And there's like, here's spiritual life. And then over here is like eating, needing sleep, the body, sex, all these things that are not spiritual. And here's spiritual stuff. And this stuff's not spiritual. When I married my wife, it was kind of a trip because all of a sudden, like, the sexual aspect of my life was part of this like holy bond that I had with this other person, and it became divinized in a way, which was really strange for me. I was like, oh, now sex has this like divine component to it, and it's like part of my spiritual duty in a way. And that's really weird, and it was really interesting. It was really interesting, honestly, to go through that process. And then with the baby and everything, I feel like that was the next step of it. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going one step further into this pool of just totally submitting my life to these, this higher force that I really shouldn't be like resisting anyway. And now I'm having a kid. I should have the kid right after Halloween, honestly. So it's insane. It's insane. That's the whole story. You have given dog comics, given good dog comics. Now we'll get baby ones. Yeah, in the M99 comics, I guess I have to have them have a kid now. I don't have to. I can do whatever I want, but I do want to do that. People saying congratulations, thanks, really epic. Patriarch, Cyclops. Yeah, it's true. The real question is, what saint is the baby going to be named after? Dude, so true. I've been going so hard on the baby names. It's been really interesting. It's really interesting. That's the other anecdote I'll tell before we pull the trigger on the show, and then we have some stuff that's not about me to talk about, but got a lot to talk about, I guess. Anyway, though, yes, the name thing's funny, too, because I'm so into aesthetics, obviously. And choosing a name with another person, it's so arbitrary, right? It's completely arbitrary, because if you like a name or you don't like a name, it's what do you appeal to? There's no standard. You could say, oh, you like the name Walter? Yes, no, there's no argument. And no, I don't like it. You can't convince someone like, oh, well, if you thought about it this way, Walter's a great name or a bad name, whatever. I like that name. That's why I picked it. just for this example. It's not what we're naming the kid. So it's been interesting because basically what I had to do with my wife is like, you know, you both make a list of almost like 100 names, right? And then you just go through and you find the tiniest Venn diagram overlap. You find this little zone where your name aesthetics overlap, and then in that zone, there's a bunch of names like, oh, you know, Charlotte. Well, that's a great name, but I knew this girl named Charlotte. I didn't like her. Can't argue with it. Sorry, cut. So we pared it down to a few. I guess I can't tell you guys, which sucks because then it would be really easy to figure out who I am because my kid's going to have some really weird name. But I'll tell you guys the names we don't go with, I guess. But I have been thinking about saints and things like that. I've been going through and I'm like, oh, the patron saint of like sword makers. That's awesome. Let's use that. So yeah, it's been a crazy time. It's been a crazy time. Speaking of crazy times, speaking of time, it is now time for the intro. Let's do this. What's going on, everyone? How's it going? We've settled into the oasis of the painting show in the desert of the cyber landscape. Here we are. Intro music, Painted Worlds. It's a painting show. Painted Worlds. Check it out. Bandcamp, Spotify. Haven't seen him online recently. Don't know what's going on with him, but he'll return. He always returns from the forest. Anyway, so hope it's going well on your end, and let's jump right in. Obviously, you were probably just here for the pre-show. I assume that some people jump in at the intro, but you were probably just here for the pre-show. So we will presumably talk about baby stuff, but I got a bunch of other stuff on my mind, honestly. So we'll start with the other stuff, jump into the painting, and then we'll kind of just talk about whatever we want to talk about. I've been enjoying the free-form, natural flow of the show. It's been very enjoyable. And if you were here last week, or just have in general been floating around, I've been talking about hitting 1800s Christian stuff, trying to crack the nut of uniquely American Christian energy, essence, what's the deal, especially in the 1800s, all these different schools, books, prophets, weird stuff popping up. It's a pretty good time. It's a pretty good time, and I decided to jump in there a little bit further. And last week we did a picture of sort of the idea of a prophet. I got something on deck that is kind of like that we're going to jump into, but I got a little story, I guess. I have an interesting story that relates to my studies. And so I've been doing the 1800s Christian thing. I did the Christian Science stuff. I was like, all right, this is kind of cool, but it's like super new agey, you know, basically merged with Christianity. Like, you don't get sick unless you think you're going to get sick kind of vibe. I poked around into a few other things. I hit the Shakers for a second. I didn't really go too far in there. I poked into a few different, you know, like Great Revival. Is that what it's called? Great Revival? The Great Awakening, things like that. I was just kind of surveying around, did some Civil War stuff, some preachers, and I'm cruising around. And a really cool part of being into theology, but more broadly religious stuff in general. And I feel like this is what drew me into, part of what drew me into the religious texts field in the beginning. I've been reading religious texts for a really long time now, most of my life actually. I feel like part of what drew me in is you can poke into something and you get this lens, and all of a sudden you can see things through this lens. And whether or not you're signing up for the program, whether or not you're signing up for the religion, that was always really cool to me. Back in the day, I could pick up, you know, a Taoism book and read a little bit, and not that you understand the whole religion, but you can see through that lens a little bit. And you're like, oh wow, I can see things through the Taoist lens. I'm getting certain questions about like life and my relationships and myself and how things happen from this lens, and put it down and pick up Bhagavad Gita. Again, not that you're a Vedic scholar, but you can read through it and all of a sudden see things through that lens. And you're like, oh, this is giving me different angles on these questions I thought about life and death, and pick up another book. And so you get the point, kind of put on these different glasses and see through things. And over the course of my process doing that, sometimes I'll put on a new pair of glasses there and I'll see things and be like, wow, I never considered that angle of this question, or wow, that's a really interesting way to see things, totally unexpected. And I kind of got obsessed with that sort of mind expanding function of it, seeing all these large, sort of the largest questions of life in general from all these different angles, basically. So going along the 1800s train, I got to Mormonism, and I was like, all right, well, if I'm doing American Christian stuff, I mean, this is like, if I'm doing weird American Christian stuff in the 1800s, this is like the cake on the top shelf. Like, this is the thing that I should definitely hit. So I listened to a few radio shows about it. It was really hard to find things that weren't from a negative perspective. Everything is from the perspective of like, oh my God, I escaped this evil cult. Let me tell you why it's bad, which has validity, but I mean, I'm looking for like the theology or the underlying essence of it. And I asked some people online that were Mormon. I was like, you send me something, like I'm getting all this just weird stuff, you know? And someone directed me to BYU's website. So I found some talks on there. A lot of them were kind of normal, like, not in a bad way, but, you know, kind of generic, like, God loves you and you should feel good about yourself kind of stuff. So I'm looking, I'm looking for the kind of meat here. Like, where's the meat that I don't know, is it here? Am I not finding it? And I had a really interesting experience because I went to bed and I woke up at like 2 a.m. just wide awake. So I couldn't sleep, so I went out. And sometimes I put on my wife is leaving, so the car probably sounds super loud. So sometimes I put on a talk in my headphones, fall asleep. So I put one on, and it was called like Joseph Smith and the Problem of Evil. And I was like, well, that sounds kind of theological. It sounds kind of cool. So I put it on, and I'm laying in bed, and the whole first part is like, why do evil things happen? Here's a story about a girl who got brutally murdered. Here's a story about a family whose house burned down for no reason. And I'm laying in my bed in the dark, like, it's probably not the best choice of talk to fall asleep to. But it was really interesting because he talked a lot about something called theodicy. That's like a theological thing where you basically try and solve the problem of evil. Theodicy is basically a whole theological field, which is, if God real, why bad thing happen? That's what theodicy is, essentially. And I had thought about that a lot before. The answer that I had, I'm just going to go on for a few more minutes and then we'll start painting, but I feel like this is relevant and interesting enough. The conclusion I came to with the theodicy stuff, not a conclusion, but where I parked my car on the theodicy highway, we talked a little bit about Platonism and Neoplatonism and things like that. And I kind of parked it on the Augustine, working with Neoplatonism, freeway, just pulled off on the side of the road there. I said, this makes sense because part of how those guys solved the theodicy problem, the problem of evil, is they say something like, I'm going to oversimplify it, one of the biggest philosophical problems ever. But they say something like, you know, you see this evil stuff and you ask, why does evil exist? But it's kind of an illusion, really. Not that evil doesn't exist, but evil doesn't have an intrinsic substance in and of itself. Goodness, good things, that's a positive quality. Goodness are good qualities coalesce together, active goodness, it's really there, it's good. But evil doesn't actually have a substance. Evil is the absence of good. And that works for something called natural evil. Natural evil is like when things just aren't that great, like you get a bad watermelon at the store. That's like a natural kind of evil. And it also works for moral evil, when people do evil things. So just to give a quick example of that, you know, if someone has a bad hand, let's say your hand got crushed in an accident, it's a bad hand. Well, how is it a bad hand? It doesn't do the things a good hand does. It doesn't move that well, maybe. Maybe it's missing a finger. Maybe it looks really deformed. It doesn't have the quality of having a proper form. But as you go into the badness of it, that badness is just the absence of positive qualities. And as you take away more and more of those positive qualities of the hand, let's say it's missing all the fingers and it can't move 100%, you turn all the hand knobs to 0, then it kind of just stops being a hand. If a hand had no fingers and it had no positive qualities at all, it would just kind of be a nub. You wouldn't even really call it a hand, right? So they go through this philosophical stuff and they're like, well, that's why evil exists. Evil is the privation of good, is like the technical way of saying it. Evil is when good isn't there, and that's why evil exists. God didn't make evil, it's just that evil is the privation of good, where evil is like nega good. It's like negative goodness, basically. So I got there and I said, well, that makes sense. I can kind of park my car here. That's a good answer. But when I talk to more people about it, if someone's being, debating, if someone's being combative, it doesn't really solve any problem, really, because you can get to that whole explanation and say, yeah, and that's why evil exists. It's just the absence of goodness. But it doesn't solve the theodicy problem, because then you can just say, well, then why did God make it like that? God could have surely set it up to where that doesn't exist. So it's just kind of like a faux answer in a way. Maybe I don't fully understand it. Or it's not I shouldn't say a faux answer. It's not a cohesive en toto explanation for it. So it was interesting because I was listening to this talk about the problem of evil from this like Mormon perspective from some random guy in the 70s. And it's interesting because it really kind of blew my mind in that by tweaking certain variables, this person had come to an understanding of the problem of evil, variables that I hadn't really considered. Like he was saying things like, if God set up the whole universe and created the universe ex nihilo, from nothing, that means from nothing in philosophy. If God created the universe from nothing, then he's kind of basically responsible for like all the stuff that happens. I mean, if you set up a situation and you control all the variables, you kind of are responsible for like everything that happens. I'm just giving you this guy's perspective. I'm not saying this is my perspective. It's just an interesting angle to come at it from. So he's like, well, in our view, we solve it because the universe wasn't created ex nihilo. A lot of this stuff just existed, and God's eternal, and a lot of this stuff is eternal. Some qualities are eternal, some properties are eternal. So we basically solved that problem because God didn't create the universe from nothing, so God isn't responsible for all this like X, Y, and Z. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. If you tweak that variable, you can get out of the problem of evil. That's really interesting. And he went through all this stuff like that. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. We'll probably talk about it a little bit more. But it was interesting because I feel like it cracked open a nut of like not new, but it really put me a layer deeper into the bigger theological questions that I have that maybe I haven't been suppressing, but that I really want to go deeper into. There's probably no answers to a lot of these questions, but even just thinking about that, if God created the universe from nothing, that cracks open the whole theological shell of like how you get Calvinism with predetermined stuff, where all of a sudden, some people will know about theology, some people don't. So eventually Calvin comes along and he's like, well, yeah, actually everything you do is predestined, because if God knows everything, he must know everything that you're going to do, right? So then when bad people exist, did God like make bad people? Did he plan for people to be bad? And you get these weird ideas about like, Jesus saving only some people, because I guess Jesus knew that some people were going to be bad and reject himself, but he made them, right? So how does that work? Did he make people knowing that he would reject him? And then you get other people coming in saying, well, you forgot about free will. Free will solves this whole problem. People have free will. But then it loops back around because, well, doesn't God know everything? So doesn't God know what you're going to do? So how does that work with free will? And from orthodoxy, I got a little bit of the answer from at least one guy of like, well, it's a mystery. You're not going to figure it out. We're not going to figure it out in the painting show right now. We're not going to solve one of the oldest problems ever right now in the show, surprisingly. But I was thinking about it a lot, and I was thinking about a lot of problems like that. And it was just interesting because, you move further and further back in your own like presuppositions, in your own things that you're bringing to the table with these problems. That was just an interesting moment. I was laying in bed at like 2 a.m. listening to some random, frankly, like Mormon guy of like all things. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting angle. I never thought of that. That's interesting, and oh, wow, I never thought of it from that perspective. Like, what do the other traditions say about X, Y, Z from this perspective? So it's really interesting, and I had a week where I thought about just a lot of stuff like that. And I was thinking about, we're about to start painting. I know I've been going on for a minute. Hopefully this is interesting. I've literally been thinking about it all week, so maybe it's like mildly interesting to you. So I was thinking about, how we get information about God, how we get, even just a foothold in starting to answer even some of these questions. And it fits with the prophet thing. We did the prophet thing last week, sort of a very, very, very abstract, like symbolic analysis of like what a prophet is and like the symbolic nature of it. And I have this book here. It's actually a really cool book. It's called The Icon Handbook, a guide to understanding icons and the liturgy, symbols, and practices of the Russian Orthodox Church. It's a really cool book. Even if you're not Orthodox, I've gotten a lot out of it. And it goes through and has all these pictures and then explanations of the pictures. It's really, really, really tight. Actually, it's really, really cool. My wife got this for me. It's really awesome. So you can imagine you can get a lot of mileage out of something like this. And I was going through here. I mean, look, this is just, I'm going to put the autofocus on the camera really quick just so I can actually show some of this off, because it's pretty awesome really quick. So I'm going to pull up configure video. I had this open, but I got excited and I closed the window. Okay, so we got autofocus on. So you can see it's got some pretty epic, let's see, can I get it to focus? Yeah, there we go. It's got some epically dense images. I mean, if you know anything about me, you know I vibe on this super hard. I mean, come on, look at this. Are you serious right now? All the different ranks of angels? Hello? I'm trying to get it to focus, sorry. Perfect. Bring it down a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So it's really epic, honestly. And a lot of them have this very distinct flavor that has that, you know, I just speak casually. I mean all this very respectfully. It has that kind of like freaky, mystical energy. It has that kind of energy of like, whoa, this is some otherworldly stuff. Not to be disrespectful. I mean that in a positive way. So it goes over what's in them and stuff like that. Anyway, the point is, sometimes you get picture inspiration from very random, I guess, unexpected sources. So of course this book would be a source of inspiration. But I was going through and I saw this little detail here. I saw this little tiny, tiny detail. Sorry, the autofocus really sucks. But we're going to have to roll with it for just a second. There we go. Perfect. Perfect. So I saw this tiny detail right here, way in the corner of this image, where an angel is carrying a guy in this tomb, in this box. And the guy has a little book. And when I read the explanation, this is a prophet. This is an angel carrying a prophet. And I thought that was such a cool little image for representing someone who comes to speak for God, just like an angel carrying this little dude in a box. And I had sketched it out. That's actually why I remembered this. I had sketched it out in this book over here. Well, it's one of my sketchbooks. Actually, this is interesting because I'm not going to go over all this stuff right now, but this is where I was going through all the Neoplatonism stuff and the problem of evil and things like that. This is the kind of stuff I post on Patreon. Since I'm having a baby, I'm going to shill my Patreon every now and then. So sometimes it's like this. Kind of rarely. I usually don't go so word heavy, but pictures. This is not meant to be a little commercial for the Patreon, but it actually could have been. Oh, here we go, the other side. So in here, I have, where is it? Boom. So I kind of sketched it out. Perfect, here we go. I sketched out this guy in here. The angel is carrying him, and we got one wing up. We got one wing down over here. Little interesting note, maybe we'll use this in the corners, but these two things are from an image of the Dormition of the Virgin when Virgin Mary ascends into heaven. Or maybe it's when she dies. I don't know if she actually dies in the theological tradition, actually. I'm kind of blanking right now. But anyway, in images like that, the angels are shown carrying the apostles, and all the apostles come from all the different lands to come see the Virgin Mary one last time. So that's a pretty epic detail there also. But anyway, I thought this would be perfect because I've been thinking so much about like how God speaks to people and how we get information from God and the prophets and things like that, and the idea of having a direct connection with God. And I think this is such an awesome image, honestly. It's a really cool one. It's one that I wouldn't come up with by myself. You know, when you're going through the book, sometimes you see something and you're like, there it is. That's what we're looking for. So I think I want to do something like this right now in the painting. That's what we're going to use. We're going to jump off from this little prophet, from this Russian icon. I'm going to move this so I can see the chat because I have not been looking at it because I was doing the opening monologue, if we want to call it that. So let's see. If I missed what you said in the chat, just you can definitely say it again because I can't pause and read through the whole thing. Although honestly, talking with you guys is probably my favorite part. So if I miss what you said, just say it again. But we'll start painting and then we'll kind of see where it goes. Since we've been talking so much, let's get a dent. Let's get a dent in the picture zone, and then we'll pick up on the things that we want to talk about. And if you've been here before, you know the first question is always, what color are we starting with? What color are we going to do the lines of our picture in? Because that really affects everything else. I think we're going to end up doing one of the ones where, hold on, I'm just refocusing the camera right now, where we use different colored lines for different items. That's been giving the pics a very like sophisticated look. So I thought about starting with ultramarine. I brought out the ultramarine first thing right here, but this is a really, really, really dark blue. This is going to be like a super, I mean, you can hear it in the name, ultramarine blue. This is like ocean blue, basically. It's super dark. So if we start with the angel face like that, you know, then all of a sudden that's going to be the highest contrast area. I kind of feel like that's not the move. We could pull a little bit of a power move with the warmest color, the cadmium scarlet. if we start with this, that would be kind of crazy. And then we could set ourselves up to do the angel in warm colors. He's going to have a halo, obviously. The halo's warm color. And then we could do the prophet in cool colors. And that would be a really tight contrast. In case people don't know what I mean by that, warm colors are literally warm, like red, orange, yellow. Well, I suppose not literally. The paint is the same temperature. But they give off the appearance of warmth. And then cool colors give off a type of coolness. And if you're making images, if you're working with images, even if you're just doing anything with color, maybe you're just dressing yourself in the morning. Hold on one second. Sorry. Working with the temperature of colors and thinking about the temperature of different colors is a way to step up how advanced your color game is. It's not as simple as it just being red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, because there are cool yellows, there are warm yellows. You know that if you watch the show. There are cool reds and warm reds. So even within each color, there's a spectrum of warmth. And this is the warmest color that we use, that I use. It's really an approximation of a pigment called vermilion. And the goal right now, as we're jumping in, the goal is going to be not to get caught up in tiny little details. I want to keep flowing, big, painterly being a key word. So let's see how much we can push the kind of use of materials here. Perfect. Okay. And let's see, I'm kind of just going to jump right in. I think we're going to outline his face. Let's see, I also have to calibrate myself. Here's the top of the page. Here's the bottom. Perfect. Let's just go for it. It's been a minute since I've been painting. I've been so busy doing other random stuff. Getting ready to move, having a baby. Life is crazy, but this is really kind of what it's all about. Maybe we can kind of mess with the line weight a little bit too. Just make sure we keep getting thick and thin lines. It's part of what makes the whole thing more interesting. Cool. I'll come in with the neck too. It's almost not enough to just outline the face. But I think we're just going to start with that. I'm going to throw down the hair in a really warm brown. Actually, if I'm pushing the color thing, we could do the hair in like a crimson. Let's do that. Perfect. Is there background music you recommend in another tab while watching your show? Yo, that's interesting, man. Oh, I got a super chat. Word up. Womp Womp said, Sneed. Yeah, tell me about it, dude. Tell me about it. That's interesting. Background music? You could go on Spotify and just type in Vaporwave. Sometimes I do that. I'll think about that. Yeah, no, I would use background music, but I thought about using copyright-free music, but then it kind of like affects the vibe in a way. I'm cool if people put on music in the background. I don't care. But then I kind of have to like adhere to that vibe, and then it affects what I'm painting. I'll come around here. I like using this kind of medieval hair for the angels. Perfect. And I guess we should have put the red background in on the neck. Perfect. Perfect. I probably made the angel a little too big, but we're just going to roll with it, to be honest with you. And really quick, actually, I have to move this lamp. I haven't had to do any light stuff for a minute, but I forgot to move this lamp, and it just will make the quality of the show so much higher if I just quickly move this. Cool. So I am going to do that. Perfect. All right. And let's just come in with the red, and we'll just kind of fade this out. I want there to be like a lot of fades. So I'm going to come in with the full pigment right here. And let's just see how much we can drag this out. We did an image of the prophet Nathan once. Was it Nathan or Nathaniel? Who works with one of the kings in the Old Testament. And his hair came out so good. I still remember that one. It's one of the best ones we did. And that's really not enough of a fade. So I'm going to come in with the paper towel right now and pick this up. Perfect. Perfect. And I'm actually going to put some of the red in here. Let's just put a little bit of the red in. Can't even really tell. Cool. And I'm going to grab some orange. Let's try and move quickly. Let's keep things as interesting as possible. I'm going to grab orange, but I'm not going to use cadmium orange. I'm going to use this color called Orange Lake Deep. It's probably seems weird to have lake in the title. We've talked about that before, but lake is derivative from might be a Dutch word that means transparent. So the lake colors are just more transparent. They used to be used for glazes. It's not really that orange. It almost looks just like the same color here. But we'll see. I never use it, so I couldn't have really anticipated that. We'll come in here, and actually, I don't need to be a slave to the pigments. I want it to be more orange, so I'm also going to drop in the cadmium yellow. So now we have a bunch of super warm colors on the table here. I'm going to mix in some of the yellow with the so-called orange, because I really want it to read as orange. And I'm going to come in and put the eyes in. Boom. Boom. And we'll come in with the nose, too. Maybe we'll even like blur out the face. We're kind of just setting it up right now. We don't necessarily know where it's going to go. When you're doing a painting like this, you know, you don't have to be married to. It's not like a Polaroid where something happens and then that's how it is. Game over. Let's come in with the clothes and let's just get more yellow-orange in here. You can maybe get the illusion of like gold a little bit if we make it just a little bit more yellow. I could drop in like an ochre color. That really is like the gold color, but I don't really want to. We'll come in here. It's a little bit, gotta have a certain level of confidence here because I'm gonna put in the prophet underneath him and I don't actually know exactly how it's gonna fit in the frame and everything, but I'm kind of just going for it. If you're doing any art stuff, if you take one thing away from the show, any like timidness that you're putting out into the image and the line making, it's gonna ruin it. If you're holding the pen and you're like, oh, I wonder if I'm gonna, game over. It's already over. Just stop. Just stop. Because that's gonna come across, and what people really respond to in an image is confidence. Even if you make a drawing that's kind of inaccurate or messed up, if you do it very confidently, people will respond to that confidence. That's a really good tip. And you know, I thought we would do the angel and then the prophet, but maybe that was sort of a stupid plan because I kind of want to start putting him in right now, so let's just do it. Let's just keep things moving. Just because an action can be predicted doesn't mean it isn't part of someone's free decision making at Owen Cyclops. Yeah, Spoon of Salty said that. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the whole free will thing and how free will intersects with God's nature is probably impossible to fully understand. I mean, right? But I found it interesting when I was going through sort of the whole theological picture as a whole, being redundant. That was a big point of contention. That was kind of a big hang-up, I think. Hold on one sec. So I'm going to throw in the prophet down here. And I can get away with almost anything because I'm going to put him in a box anyway. So if I make him too big, too small, it doesn't really matter. So I'm really able to just confidently come in here and throw this guy down. And as I was doing that, I sort of made the subtle decision to make him a little bit bigger than the angel in a way. If they're both the same exact size, then you have a balance there. Sometimes balances are a little stale. But if one's bigger, one's smaller, you have that dynamism. And you usually want to err on the side of more dynamic decisions. I'm going to make a really, really cringe reference just because symbolically it really fits. But of course I disavow all divination-y things. But in the Zodiac they do have a really good example of opposites and balanced opposites and stuff like that, because in the Zodiac you have Libra, which is the scales, and that's two things that are in balance that are like scales, like two scales, 5 pounds on one side, 5 pounds on the other side. It's balanced, but then there's no dynamism, there's no interactivity. It's not like a yin-yang. A yin-yang is two opposites, but they're not exactly in stasis. So that sounds like a really weird, random distinction to make, but it's actually really useful in your mind if you're doing anything creative to remember that two opposites can either be in stasis or they can be a dynamic integration of those opposites. I actually think about that all the time when I'm doing art. All right, so I'm going to throw down the beard. I'm going to use cobalt blue. You might not even be able to tell it's a different blue, but let's just see what happens. I'm just going to throw this down. Cool. And I don't need to like slavishly adhere to the sketch here. what kind of beard I'm throwing down feels like a really big call. I kind of want to just make it a nice, like, tapery beard. Initially, your instinct, like my initial instinct, is usually, well, I don't want to get the cool little doodads in and little hair and stuff, but oftentimes it just looks really, looks kind of messy. Looks kind of messy sometimes. And I feel like a prophet would have a nice beard. So let's see. I'm going to come in here. Just going to come down. Boom. And I intentionally made this line get a little bit lighter. Again, just because I wanted it that way. Now I know this looks a little weird, but I'm gonna try and get this painted kind of texture everywhere at the end of it. So don't worry about that if you're worried. If you're worried. And we'll put this guy's eyes closed too. Sometimes the eyes, not eyes closed, but sometimes the line eyes feels like a little bit of a cop out. But here it feels appropriate because I want it to be a little ambiguous. Is he looking inward? Is he presently getting some kind of revelation from God? Is he looking outward? Is he about to speak and tell everyone what's going on? And let's get the fade on the beard too. Just going to come up here. Perfect. And yeah, someone said, your thread on Protestantism was interesting. Just made a quick post one morning when I was having coffee, but it's interesting because I remember, I don't know how recently I talked about this on the show, but when I first got really into Christianity, I had like a long period of study, and then on Twitter I made this thread where I was like, I have all these questions, and maybe they're dumb questions, but like, and it was stuff like, if we're supposed to just do whatever it says in the Bible, why didn't Jesus just like write the Bible? Like, Jesus didn't write the Bible. When he left people, right? So what's the deal with that? And questions like that. And I looked back at it kind of recently, and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm way more equipped to answer these questions now. But now I have a whole nother set of questions. So maybe I'll do another thread like that soon, where it's like the questions that I have. Okay, I'm going to throw down the box. We're going to cut it kind of close. I'm going to come down here. I got to get the box so I can start like putting him in and around it. Let's see. Cool. I'm going to open this right here. Let's see, what other stuff have I been hitting that's really interesting? So much stuff, man. I literally don't even know where to start right now. Can I get the Viridian open? Let's see. Come on. Perfect. So I'm going to open this. I just kind of wish that I feel like I just want to sit down, honestly, and like grill a bunch of experts in their field, asking them like kind of the dumb and like really basic questions, and then pool all their answers and then look it over for myself. Probably not going to do that, but that's like kind of what I want to do. I want to sit down with someone who's like, yeah, I know how it is in this system, and ask them like 200 questions, and then go to the next guy and ask him all these questions. One thing that was interesting is that so this guy wrote this thing all about Mormonism that I was reading, because that's like where I'm at right now in terms of perusing stuff. And he was talking about theologians, and something that I thought was really interesting was that, so I'm come in and try and paint some straight lines on this box. He was saying, usually people that are into this stuff are, I don't want to say obsessed. Obsessed makes it sound like it's a bad thing. They're very into like, what are the heresies? Why are they heresies? When did they become heresies? What's the correct view of this thing? Man, I painted a really straight line there. That's nice. What's the correct view of this thing? What's the correct view of this thing? What's the Orthodox view here? What's the heretical view here? I don't mean Orthodox as in Eastern Orthodox. I mean Orthodox as in the correct view. And he was saying, but as much as that's important, this is just literally some random guy. He said, as much as that's important, that's mostly like a thing for theologians and like academics and stuff like that. And he was saying that for the average person on the ground, if you asked even the most like devout, normal person of that religion, they would have a bunch of views that were incorrect. And he said, if you went to some Russian church, we're doing a Russian thing, I guess, a little bit here. If you went to some Russian church and found some like super devout grandmother and asked her a bunch of stuff, she wouldn't have all like the theologically correct answers. She probably would have a bunch of like incorrect answers. And I noticed that a lot because there's a heresy called modalism. I don't know if it's a heresy, but it's an incorrect view. There's an incorrect view called modalism. And modalism is the idea that, I might poorly explain this, so don't like rewire your views based on what I'm saying ever, but especially in this circumstance. But modalism is kind of the idea that, you can hear it in the name, that the Trinity is just 3 different modes of one person, basically. And people use the analogy of like, oh, well, it's like water. You know, you get water in ice form, you get water in liquid form, and you get water in vapor form. So it's kind of like water. It's kind of like basically what the Trinity is. And at least one church guy I was listening to was saying, yeah, everyone says that, but that's actually inaccurate. That's a heresy called modalism, because actually the persons of the Trinity are 3 distinct persons that happen to be in this union. Not happen to be, but that are in this union of the Trinity. So that's an incorrect explanation. It's actually a technical fallacy called modalism. And I was like, okay, but literally everyone thinks that. If you ask like any normal person to explain the Trinity, I feel like you always get an answer like that. So it's interesting because he was saying, you know, there's this gap between the theologians, and I guess you could call them academics. I mean, we use academics in a different sense, but in a way, theologians are academic. And there's that gap there, and it's kind of interesting, you know, and I think that manifests in any system, really. I mean, if I went through this town that I live in right here and asked, you know, even the most devout Christian people, well, what about X, Y, Z? What about this? What about this? You know, there's nothing wrong with them, but they definitely, presumably most of them don't know all like the correct answers about stuff. I was talking to someone recently. They were talking about the Old Testament, and they were like, do you know there's this part in the Old Testament where Moses sees God's back? Did you know that? And I was like, yeah, that's Jesus's back. He's seeing Jesus's back. It's a theophany. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, in some interpretations, that's Jesus. Because God, the Father, doesn't have a back. He's seeing a human back. And who's the human part of the divinity that has a back? It's Jesus. That's my understanding of it. I'm not saying that's correct, but that's my understanding of it. They were like, oh, I didn't know that, you know? And there's like a trillion things like that, even more basic stuff, like, you know. And it's interesting because he was talking about the divide between like the academic answers and then the on-the-ground answers you would get from like real normal people. And I thought the divide was like really interesting. I was really thinking about that and what it means, because, you know, I feel like with most people, when you talk to like normal people, all the kind of like meme critiques you get of Christianity are sort of like veiled. They're veiled in like Reddit language usually. Like people are like, oh, well, you know, Jesus prays to God in this part of the Bible, but isn't Jesus God? How could like Jesus pray to himself? Like, owned, gotcha. But they normally are veiled legitimate questions. They normally are veiled legitimate inquiries that people just don't understand on the ground. And maybe it's part of the failing of, oh, dude, this halo, painting this yellow halo, so good. Maybe it's part of the failing of, you know, one system or another, that a lot of people who have been into this stuff for their whole life still have these really like basic questions, you know. It's kind of interesting if you think about it. I'm just going to come through here really quick. Perfect. Let's see if I can kind of fade this halo up. And to keep it interesting, I'm going to drop another color in this halo once I get this fade going up here. I haven't looked at the chat for a minute, so maybe you guys are saying some interesting stuff, but hold on one sec. I'm going to come up here. From a Christian perspective, what's the deal with Warhammer? I have no idea. I remember you saying that you avoid purple because it looks artificial. Have you ever seen blue tea? It turns purple when you add lemon. Well, no, dude, I haven't seen that. It sounds crazy, but I will look at that. One week we're going to do a picture out of like tea or coffee or something for sure. It's also interesting too because then I kind of lost my train of thought for a second. So then I was asking myself all these questions like that. And even I have certain questions like that because I was hitting all these nodes where like, yeah, well, what the academic, I'm using the word academic in like a classical sense. I don't mean like part of like a university academic, just to be clear. I want the magenta. I want to throw a magenta glow in there. Let's use this like, we're going to use kind of a crazy color right now. We're going to try and push the envelope a little bit here. You know? And yeah, so a lot of what the theologians say about certain topics, it's like, what do normal people think about that? I had this interesting experience because I was at this bookstore and I happened to wander through the kids' book section. Sometimes I do that because I'm mentally 4 years old, obviously. And there was a book that was like, this book is for kids who have, you know, terrible diseases or are worried about death. It's all about what happens after you die. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's pretty weird. Someone made a book like that? Wow, I'll definitely check it out. So I opened the book. And the book was like extremely... Because I was expecting like, you're going to go to heaven. Here's what it's like. Boom. Check out these pics. But the book was very like amorphous and non-committal. The book was very much so like using metaphors of like, it's kind of like a nice ride through the sky. It's kind of like the warmth of the sun and like pictures of clouds. And I read the whole thing and I was like, this is not comforting at all. I was like, this is not giving me literally any information. If I was a kid that was wondering about this, I would finish this book and then be like, okay, what? This didn't give me any answers. And I'm sure the answers are out there, but sometimes I feel like that's what I get from the more classical theological answers, or it's just stuff where it gives me more questions. Like if you ask a random Christian person on the street, what happens when you die and go to heaven? I feel like you would get 10 to 15 different answers. And a lot of them would just be straight up, not in a bad way even, but like folk religion, basically. A lot of people would be like, well, I don't know, I want to like go be with my family and like my dog will be there. And like, you know what I mean? They're not quoting like Augustine or like Thomas Aquinas or something. And a lot of the theological answers kind of give you more questions, you know, like I feel like the answer I kind of cobbled together is like, well, you kind of just go and like worship God and it's like really tight. I'm not even making fun of it, I'm just saying. You know, but that kind of raises a lot of other questions too of like forever. That's what I'm gonna do forever. I mean, that sounds kind of cool. I'm down. But you know, this other guy was saying like, well, isn't that what angels kind of do already? Don't some angels kind of just already exist in a state like that? So like our ultimate goal is to just like kind of become like angel-esque. We'll become kind of like angels. This halo looks sick, by the way. Looks really tight. The colors are looking really good. I'm gonna start throwing the angels' clothes. That's what I'm gonna do right now. I didn't think I was gonna use brown, but I'm gonna use brown right now. There probably is some like theology student in the chat who's like freaking out right now, like, oh my god, it's not like that. It's typing like a 3-page response, which would be cool actually. You know, but then that raises a lot of questions too, because it's like, well, you know, why are we here then? Why are we... That's a whole other thing with like the fall and like, why are we here? Why am I in this like fallen world then? And then it comes back to the God's omnipotence. Like, well, didn't he know that we were going to fall? Didn't he know this was all going to happen? So I guess this is all part of the plan. But then ultimately the fall is like a tragedy, right? It's a tragedy that we're here, but at the same time, like God knew what was going to happen, I guess. I'm not critiquing any system. I'm just kind of venting my own like lack of understanding, which I've literally been thinking about like all day and all week. Really all week. And I know there are some answers, but it just makes me want to go deeper into like the nuts and bolts, you know? It makes me want to go deeper and have like a deeper level of understanding. And I guess in a way that's why I wanted to paint this picture of a prophet, because it's almost like information only God can really truly know in a way. I don't know. It's very interesting. I wonder what people think about that, because I really truly don't know. And then it was interesting because I was listening to these guys, you know. I'm like, no offense if any like Mormon people are here. I mean, I'm not trying to offend you, but I was pretty much expecting it to be like Christian Science tier. I was really expecting it to be like, oh, well, this is crazy. But they have a different view of a lot of things that, you know, I'm not going to go like sign up right now, obviously. But it really made me think of like getting a cohesive explanation from the more traditional Christian systems. Because I don't know if people know this. I thought this was super interesting. In their view, it actually explicitly says this in the Book of Mormon. If we're doing the 1800s American Christianity thing, we got to dig into it a little bit. But in their view, the fall wasn't a bad thing even. In their view, the fall was like intentional. And God planned it so that we could go through this whole process of like living in this world and like reproducing and getting out of the Garden of Eden and going through this whole like positivistic process that has some like positive end. So again, I'm not saying that I consider a lot of ideas without taking them on myself, obviously. But I thought that was interesting because I was like, yeah, well, on my side of things, on this other side, I kind of, the fall is like a tragedy, but then I'm here with my wife and dog, and like that's really tight. I really like that. So like, I guess that's a good thing, but I'm in this fallen world where I'm not really supposed to be. I'm only here because Adam did this like horrible thing, but I like being here sometimes, right? Like it's kind of tight that I'm here, but then when I die, I guess I go back to not being in a state like this. I go back to not being like this, kind of. So yeah, it was really interesting. Kind of like unexpectedly really illumined a lot of my lack of understanding about things, which if you know me, you know that there's no lack of understanding things. So I'm going to throw in his clothes a little bit here. I mean, one thing this guy was saying was like, well, if we're just going to die and go up to heaven and kind of, oversimplifying it, enter a state that's kind of like angel-like, then why couldn't we have just stayed there? Why couldn't we have just stayed there and like been like angels? And angels don't have to go through this whole process of like coming down to earth and like maybe getting hit by a car or something. So like, why are we here in this like gauntlet then going through all this like potentially horrible stuff? Like, what's the deal with that? He was like, there must be some like positive reason for it. It can't be like just a glitch in the matrix. Maybe it is. I don't know. But like I was saying in the beginning, sometimes you talk to someone, or I wasn't talking to them, reading is kind of like talking to people. And you get angles on questions that are outside of your system, and it makes you want to go back into the system that you're coming from and sort of look at things from different angles and different perspectives and ask about your own presuppositions and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to throw in the right side of this. Man, I was just talking a lot, but I love the colors and situation that we got up here. I really like this quality up here. I want to bring this quality down into here. This is looking tight. This is not there yet. We're not there yet. Have you listened to the Lord of Spirits podcast? I found it useful for the kind of questions you're asking. No, I don't know what that is, but I will check it out. I would write it down right now, but I can't. If you're on Twitter, send it to me on Twitter, or I'll maybe remember. Okay, so let's paint in the rest of this kind of tomb over here. It's not really a tomb. I don't want to call it that. Let's paint in the rest of this window. It's a window. And we'll have these bleed together a little bit here. Perfect. Oh, yeah. Cool. Great. So the other interesting thing I read, this is the topic for this week, so if it's not interesting, I'm really sorry. I thought it was super interesting. But the other interesting thing I read was this guy who wasn't Mormon, but he was just kind of looking into it as a Christian person. Like, not looking into it like to join it. He was just looking at it and sort of analytically evaluating its like nature from the standpoint of someone who is in Western Christianity. And it was kind of interesting because it was almost like dissecting like the pros and cons and of the system itself. And he was basically kind of asking like, why is Mormonism unique and what's the deal with it like today? And one thing he said that was really interesting is he said sort of an unexpected aspect of this system. I just got a pop-up that says dark web monitoring not activated. Yeah, I don't want that. That sounds sketchy as heck, bro. And he was saying, every male in Mormonism is called to be like the spiritual leader of their family, right? So he says the unexpected, like maybe not unexpected, but the subtextual like consequence of this is that all of the theology and everything has to be able to be explained by every father. Everyone who has a family, which is essentially everyone, right? Ideally, I guess, in that system, has to be able to explain all the spiritual stuff to their family. He's like the spiritual educator for the family. And I thought that was really interesting because he was saying that basically makes it so that everything has to be, he didn't say this, but I'm going to kind of phrase it this way, so that everything has to be able to be explained by a completely normal, not academic person. And I thought that was really interesting too, because that must affect things in some way, like on the ground. And then over in Western Christianity, normal Western Christianity, we could say, we really don't have that situation. It's kind of interesting. Okay, so we're gonna put this guy's book in. I want to put that in now because I guess if it's a book, if it's a tablet, really, if it's like the revelation that he's received, it kind of has to have like a special place in the picture. So the question is, what color are we gonna make it? I guess this angel has a very like kind of biblical. I guess all angels have a biblical feel, but maybe with colors, it feels very old. You know, I got the brown and red, so maybe we'll make it like a stone tablet. Maybe we'll make it like a real like old school prophet. You know. So that means maybe we'll use a brown, but brown isn't a very electric color. It's not a very exciting color. I almost want to use like a bright green. I could make it a red. That would actually be interesting because here we have the angel who is warm colors. The prophet's cool colors, but then the piece of divinity the prophet is holding could be the warm colors from above. Well, obviously, when you say it that way, you know that we're going to do that. With the baby on the way, are you chasing a denomination now? I recommend Catholicism. Yeah, it's also interesting too because, again, going over all this stuff. So you can imagine me reading that, right? You can imagine me reading what I just said. This guy, you know, neutral guy, just going over it, saying, well, yeah, in this system, like it's not even implicit. It's kind of explicit that the whole thing has to be able to be explained by. I'm going to put the guy's other hand here, so I have to change colors. It's kind of annoying, but it's okay. Has to be explained by every person because the father is like explicitly the spiritual head of the family and is responsible for spiritually educating the family. And I was like, man, tell me about it because that's also part of the situation that I'm staring down the barrel of right now. And I really don't want to mess that up because I'm going to have a kid. And obviously, if you know even literally anything about me, you are well aware that I really actually do think that, you know, you need to have some understanding of God. Maybe understanding isn't the right word. Maybe love. We'll just go the Augustinian route. Some love of God incorporated into your worldview and system. Otherwise, you're really not going to, it doesn't really play out, I really don't think, long term. So now it's interesting because I'm going to have a kid. And I'm implicitly or explicitly going to be the main worldview imparter to the kid. Obviously. I mean, maybe the kid will go to X, Y, and Z school. Maybe the kid will talk to X, Y, and Z person. But I'm going to have the most time with the kid. And my wife, too. But she's not a theologian. She's, you know, she's just a cool person. But anyway, so yeah, I'm going to be kind of responsible for that. And I really don't want to mess it up. And I really don't want to give like bad answers. I don't want to try and like force something. That's been a really interesting aspect of the whole thing also, because with my wife, like, you know, I kind of feel like, maybe this sounds bad, but I kind of feel like if it was just me, you know, just me like alone doing my thing, I could kind of lock into something and say, you know, all right, well, this is how it is. I'm just going to kind of lock into this. I have that ability. Maybe it's part of being like a mystical person. At some point you can say, all right, well, yeah, sure. Like, I'll just choose to kind of believe this or whatever. About like little specific things, let's say. But with her, it's like, I don't know, because there's another person involved, it almost locks me out of like LARPing about anything, if that makes any sense, because ultimately I go in the other room and there's this other person there and I have to like talk about it with them, and you know, she's down, but I don't know. Now there's going to be this kid involved, and I really don't want to mess that up. I really don't want to have my kid be one of these kids who's like, yeah, well, I was raised Christian, but then I kind of realized it all doesn't make any sense and it's just fairy tales. So then I just kind of stopped and I kind of just dropped it. And my dad's really into it, but it's really not my thing. I'm kind of like an atheist. I really don't want that to happen. It's kind of like my responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. So in a way, I feel like giving a cohesive explanation for some of these things is really important. At the same time, maybe some of these questions aren't what's important. You know what I mean? I can't really tell. Part of me feels like, you know, I listened to this thing called Seraphim Rose's Orthodox Survival Guide. And he was talking about the story of St. Christopher in the Golden Legend. St. Christopher sometimes is depicted with the dog head. We actually talked about it on here once before. But you might see an image of a sort of jacked dude carrying baby Jesus. That's St. Christopher. And there's this whole story about him, you know, going to, I don't know, maybe like a tavern even or something, and seeing some really jacked person, and he's like, who are you scared of? And the jacked person says, oh, I'm scared of the devil. And St. Christopher, before he's a saint, Christopher says, oh, well, this devil guy must be really powerful. I'm going to go find him, you know? And then somehow he goes to find the devil, and then when he finds the devil, he hears the devil saying, oh, you know who I'm scared of, though? I'm scared of this guy, Jesus. And St. Christopher says, oh, well, if the devil's really powerful and the devil's scared of Jesus, then that's really the guy who I should go find. And then he goes somewhere and someone says, oh, if you're looking for Jesus, you know, just go wait by the river. And he goes to the river. I'm really breezing through this story. He goes to the river, and then some kid, I think it's a kid, I think it's like an infant even or someone, comes along and says, hey, can you help me get across the river? And Christopher carries him over the river and realizes he's like, you know, almost like feeling like trillions of pounds. And Christopher asks, why are you so heavy? What's going on here? And the baby or the infant or the toddler, or maybe it's a guy, says, because I'm carrying the sins of the world. And Christopher realizes that's Jesus, and then becomes Saint Christopher, I guess. I'm telling you the dumb version of the story. And Sarah from Rose says, you know, that's a cool story, yeah, but the problem is that by telling saint stories in this way, you get intelligent people who are going to come along and say, well, this is a fairy tale, obviously. This is something fantastic that medieval people started telling each other. This didn't really happen. And he says that it throws a wrench in the whole theological system because it sets up the person hearing it to start thinking of saints and these figures as like fables and putting them in the category of like Little Red Riding Hood and stuff like that. So he says, you know, I don't know if he's obviously biased towards his own system like everyone is, but then he says, you know, well, in Orthodoxy, we don't do this. The saints are like normal people. Not normal, but you know what I mean? The saints are like real people who struggle with real issues and stuff like that. And that really hit me like so hard because I can totally see where he's coming from. But at the same time, I love things like that. I love things like that. It's one of my favorite parts of like folk religion and stuff. But now it's kind of like pedal to the metal if I'm responsible for, in a positive way, indoctrinating, as in giving a doctrine to a kid, because I don't want to accidentally do that. I don't want to accidentally set it up so they get to be, you know, 16 and they're like, yeah, these were just kind of fairy tales. You know, this is something my dad's into. So I have been thinking about it a lot, man. And then of course, you know, it's kind of a long walk, but then I'm listening to this guy who's like, yeah, you know, in this like bizarro, again in a respectful way, form of Western Christianity, it's designed so that every father is able to teach all their kids, you know, basically everything they need to know. It's really interesting, man. It's really interesting times over here at the Cyclops Ranch. Okay, I'm going to paint in an under robe, a robe underneath this guy down here. I thought I had the cerulean blue. I do, it's right here. You don't need to chase a denomination down, just read the Bible with the kid and teach them to pray. Yeah. Well, it's also interesting because, so then stacked on top of all that, this is a real window into my brain, but also it's relevant to like larger theological questions and theological values and spirituality in the West and modern times and stuff. Because on top of all that, I also feel like I need to usher the kid into some type of like spiritual community. And then that just stacks the issue. Now you took that issue that I just explained and then ran it through like an amplifier. Because then on top of that, there's the issue of like belonging to a spiritual community and stuff, which is a church. That's what a church is. So it has been really interesting, man, because, yeah, I mean, I just told you why. It has been really an interesting thing, and I really am taking that kind of seriously. At the same time, maybe I'm overly worried about it. Maybe just by virtue of hanging out with me, honestly, for X number of years, the kid will pick it up and realize sort of, I guess you could say, part of the nature of spiritual things. Not that I have like knowledge of it, but just what it's like to live with that as part of your life. But yeah, I really am taking it very seriously. I'm kind of worried about it, to be honest with you. To be honest with you, I have no Christian background in my upbringing. And my wife went to, she went to a kind of like Waldorf-y. It wasn't Waldorf, but it was something like Waldorf. If you guys don't know what Waldorf is, it's based off Rudolf Steiner. And he's basically like a hyper tripped out guy who was also Christian. So it's kind of cool for a kid because it's like Christianity's on in the background, but they don't like talk about Christianity. But they'll celebrate like St. Michael's Day and stuff like that, but they don't talk about like doctrine or anything. So neither of us have experience, getting, I guess you could say, catechized or stuff like that. Throw in this blue robe here, and I'm a little worried. I don't want to say worried, but I'm gonna throw in this blue here. It kind of looks tight with the white, where he's wearing white. Maybe I should wait a little bit. Maybe we'll get a little bit, not messy, but a little bit uncontrolled with the halos and stuff, and then we'll see where we want to go. Okay, what time is it? Perfect. Do you think St. Christopher had a dog head? I don't know. We'll talk about that. How are you going to help your child make sense of evolution? That's a really good question, man. Honestly, I have thought a lot about that too. I guess this is like, how am I going to raise my kid? The episode, plus mega theological questions through the lens of Mormonism. Only here. You're only going to get that kind of broadcast here. I think with a lot of the bigger worldy questions that dovetail with questioning the general consensus on stuff. For example, you said, how are you going to help your kid make sense of evolution? I really think what I'm going to do, I thought about that a lot because I think a lot of crazy stuff. I'm pretty self-aware. I think a lot of stuff that most people would consider insane, and I'm well aware of that. So I don't want to lie to my kid, but I also don't want to indoctrinate them into being like a total freak. Kind of I do, but I want to do it responsibly. So I think with a lot of that stuff, I'm just going to tell the kid, here's this thing. Here's what everyone else thinks about it. Here's what I think about it. You have to make up your own mind about it. Evolution's kind of a perfect example. I mean, if my kid looks at all the evidence and says, well, I think X about this, I'll say, well, all right, whatever, man. You got to figure that out for yourself, And I think I'm going to do that with a lot of issues or, concepts or even things that I'm unsure of. There's things that I'm totally unsure of, And I'm not going to tell the kid one way or the other. I'll tell him, I don't know. I looked into this. I kind of think it's this way, but I really don't know, to be honest with you. I think that's kind of a good approach. I'm going to throw in just the yellow halo, but I don't want to intrude on the angel too much. Yeah, this is good. We're getting a little bit of an interplay now between the top and the bottom. I think that's a good approach because also the thing is, I think it's healthy. I think it's good to have the kid, figure some stuff out on their own. Maybe they're a little kid, they'll think not a little kid, maybe they're younger, they'll think one way about it. They're older, they can change their mind. I don't know, it seems kind of ideal, honestly. I thought I would fill this in with yellow, but I'm really liking this this fade that we got here. Just the boom, just the lines. It's getting a nice, sophisticated look. I'm going to paint this in a little bit here, though. Yeah, there we go. Come up here a little bit. The community aspect of Christianity is absolutely necessary. Someone said that. Yeah, I agree, man. And I think being sort of like a lone dude out here doing my thing really made me realize the need for spiritual community and how it's not just incidental. It kind of reminded me of putting a little bit of light in here. I think putting a little bit of yellow highlights and stuff in here is going to be good. It sort of reminded me of I used to listen to Stefan Molyneux sometimes. And he used to do these call-in shows, right? I know people have feelings about him. I don't really care, though, honestly. He used to do call-in shows, And what would always happen is someone would call in and say, yeah, I listen to your show all the time. I think it's so good. I really love you. You're a great guy, man. I listen to your advice all the time and all that stuff. And they'll talk about some, psychological issue they had or something about their life. And Stefan Molyneux will say, well, have you been to therapy? And they'll say, no. And Molyneux says, well, you said you listen to the show all the time, right? And the person says, yeah, all the time. And Molyneux says, and I tell people to go to therapy all the time, right? And the caller says, yeah, you do. And he's like, so did you think that just didn't apply to you? You think I'm just talking to everyone except you? And whatever you think about therapy, I thought that was funny because that's how I felt about the Christian community stuff. It's I got to this point where I was sitting alone in my studio and I was like, man, I really feel like I would benefit from being in a community of people who also share my spiritual views and are also on the same spiritual path. And I felt like, all the theologians that I've read and all the scriptures kind of just looked at me and been like, yeah, Yeah, you think we're not taught, you think we're just giving you this advice, you think it doesn't apply to you, you think it's just like, oh, everyone else should go to church, everyone else should be a part of XYZ, it just doesn't apply to you. And I was like, wow, I just owned myself because I kind of was acting that way. I was like, oh, you mean me? I was like, you mean me? You mean I should go to a church? Oh, yeah, that is a good idea. I literally had that moment. It's like, oh, I've drawn so many pictures of churches, but you mean I should actually go there? Oh, yeah, that would be a good idea. Oh, that's why those things exist and why they're so pretty. Oh, so yeah, I do have to do that. Have you started to be dumped into a whole bunch of worry into education and Mozart CDs and all that stuff? Not really. Like all the weird kid stuff. I mean, not to jack a term from someone else, but it's not very Lindy. I think me and my wife are both kind of on like the. That's where like Waldorf school stuff really shines because, they're very like anti-tech. They don't even let kids have like plastic stuff. Usually, they just have kids doing like wooden toys. Even the dolls, most of the dolls don't have faces traditionally because the kid is supposed to imagine the face on the dolls. So I can't afford Waldorf school. It's kind of for like rich people, I guess, but I like that vibe a lot. I'm gonna see if I can get a kind of like pink glow around this book right here. Yeah, it looks kind of good, right? Let's get a little bit more of a pink glow. Make it a little bit darker, and then we'll brush it out a little bit. It's actually coming out really well. Been talking a lot. We haven't really been talking as much about the image as we usually do, but I've had a lot on my mind. Had a lot on my mind. Cool. I'm gonna come down here. Perfect. Yeah, this is looking pretty cool. It's looking pretty cool. I'm trying to get the glow to have the look that I want. That actually looks pretty good. Just kind of matte, just kind of bringing it out like that. I like this little ridge of darkness on the outside. Although I don't know how it's going to look when it dries. Just kind of cool. I'll come down here, just kind of bring this out a little bit. Do you play any musical instruments? Yeah, I play bass guitar. It's over here. I haven't been doing it much though because I've been scrambling about baby stuff. But yeah, I play bass guitar and I think it really suits my personality really well. I've been playing it for like a really long time. Based home birth. We're not doing a home birth. I'm a little... maybe I would if my wife like really pushed for it. I'm a little paranoid, as you may know from talking to me for more than 1.5 seconds. And we kind of got an ideal situation where it's like not in the hospital, but it's kind of adjacent to the hospital. So if anything goes wrong, we can go to the hospital. But I'm not powerful enough to do straight up the home birth right off the bat. Okay, these are great questions. We'll keep hitting them. There's one little issue, not issue, but if I'm looking at this, let's kind of reassess for a second. It's looking really tight. It's looking really sick. I'm going to add a little bit of more dimension behind the thing here, but if I'm looking at this, what needs attention here is these clothes, because if you're looking with your eye, it's dope, looks great, it's dope, looking good, okay, his face is all right, and now we're like, this is not addressed. Addressed is the perfect word. Sometimes you're looking at a picture you've made, if you want language to empower yourself to say what's wrong with it or what needs to change, this looks unaddressed. It looks like this has not been considered fully. The only thing is I don't really know what to do down there because the strength up here is coming from all these colors and their interplay. All the blues have kind of just been acting the same. They've kind of just been giving me the same energy, which is not really what we want. We could have hit him with the purple. That would be an insane move right now. That would be truly insane. We could have hit him with the Prussian blue. Let's start with the Prussian blue. This is a little bit more of a green blue, but it's very, very, very dark. Whereas the other blues we've been using are red blues. So actually, maybe you can even see the difference. Just get nice and thin. So you can see there's almost like a greeny, oceany blue over here. But up here, obviously you wouldn't look at it and say it's a red blue, but it's more of like a navy blue. That's actually the perfect way to say it. This is like a navy blue, and this is like a little bit more of a green blue. But I don't even know if this is going to give us the tension and the colors that we need, the interplay, because these really function as different colors. See, it's not. It just looks like another blue. It just looks like another blue. What does that mean for us here? What are we going to do? It does look good, though, but it just looks like the same blue. Let's come over here. Let's just pick this up right here. Coming across. Boom. Okay, okay. We need another color, though. We really do. Are we going to unleash the purple? I'm kind of scared. I'm a little bit scared, honestly, to unleash the purple. But I think we should. I think we should not hold back. This is the coolest color in the arsenal. It's called dioxazine violet, and we are going to unleash it right now. It might not work. It might work well. We have no idea. And I hyped it up a lot, so I have to open it, but I can't get this open right now. I might even just cut it open. Don't want to do that because it's a full tube of paint. Let's see. Is there anything in the chat I can read while I'm... No. No one asked me any questions recently. How can we get this open? We have to now. We have to. This is the thing we need. Maybe it's a sign that I should use a different color, because there is this red violet I'm looking at here, but I feel like I hyped this up so much now. Let's see. I'm going to unfurl the bottom. I'm going to unfurl the bottom. No, it's not going to work. I can't turn back. Damn, what am I going to do? Could it be a sign that I'm supposed to use a different color? This is... Oh, this is the same problem! Oh my god, what's with the purples? Alright, let's do it. I'm just going to poke into this with a razor blade right now. And I'll like tape it up or something after the show. I never use this color. That's probably why this happened. What's the smart way to do this? I'm just going to poke in. I'm going to cut out a little flap. That's what I'm going to do. I haven't done this in a long time. I'm going to cut out a little flap. Perfect. I'm going to open it. There we go. I'm going to squeeze some out. Wounded. The wounded paint tube. Tragic in a way. Okay. Let's get it going again. Perfect. So let's see. Now we have to use this color. There's a lot of hype. It's just a really, really, really cool violet. And I can't tell if I should just rush in like crazy hard with this or what. I talked before about how, you know, the viewer can sense the timid energy. But I also don't want to accidentally turn up the contrast too much because it's so dark. Let's just kind of go for it though. Yeah, that already is starting to look interesting. Come down here. Now the arm is a little too light. Yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, now we're talking. Now we're talking here. Yeah, that was tight. Okay, perfect. And let's get a little bit more of the other colors in here. Perfect. Okay, here we go. That was so the move. Yeah, dude. Nice. I'm even going to come over here. Just drop in the Prussian blue. Yeah, dude, now we're talking. Now we're talking. Right here. So dark, but I actually like it. I'm kind of feeling like I should do that. Perfect. Perfect. And I want to cut up here with this purple too. Perfect. Nah, that line looks kind of wussy, doesn't it? That's not how we want it to be. Yeah. Oh, dude. That was just it right there. That was just it right there. Let's see, can we get another? Maybe just... Oh, that's right there. Perfect. Oh, dude. Man, that was 3,000% the move. See, you can see what I was saying before, actually. It's a perfect illustration of it. Like, you could even get like, oh, well, is it less clear now? I can't really tell if it looks... But just you can feel the confidence of the dark colors just like melding and flowing together. And you really do visually respond to it. You really do. You can't help it. You can't help it. How can you resist it? Okay. Boom. Pick up, pick up, pick up. Cool. Actually, though, I liked that darkness there. Perfect. And I'm going to try and add to the glow a little bit. Perfect. Perfect. Dude, it's looking good. All right, this is looking good now. Let's see, I might even try and add a little bit of the glow, like the tablet is glowing full on. That's too much. It actually looks kind of cool though. It looks pretty cool. I want to dab it up just a tiny bit. Yeah. Oh yeah, perfect. Let's see if we can get a little. Cool. There we go. You just saw the pink glow. Very subtle. Very subtle come in there. We're going to get some on his hands. You don't want to overdo it. Once you start throwing in the glow, it's really easy to get way too excited and like overdo it. But it is a good effect because it really does feel like it's glowing. And I almost feel like we have to do something about the side of his face. It's not like a big problem, but it's just not exactly popping off like it should be. You know, actually, I see what the problem is. I see what the issue is. The issue is actually this line over here. What color was the head? It was ultramarine, so it's this color. So actually, the issue is not the shading. The issue is this line. Perfect. Yeah, dude. Yeah, that looks really tight. We'll bring the light so we can. There we go. Perfect. Wow. That was very electric. It was very electric. Very electrifying. Color scheme on the upper sleeve of the Prophet has some sweet El Greco vibes. Looks sick. Yeah, it kind of does actually, someone said. Why are angels always making prophets eat bitter scrolls? I don't know. I don't know. Have I seen a picture of a prophet eating a scroll? I don't know. Unless that's an epic setup for a joke. That would be really tight. But I don't know why angels make prophets do things. Chat Noir tied this $5. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I will buy my baby one baby shoe with your $5. Thank you very much. Glow on the beard makes me think of Moses' face. The glowing when he comes down with the tablets. Yeah, true, actually. True. Okay, this is a very interesting point here because, you know, we always kind of get to this point. It's dope, to speak casually with you. Looks really good. I feel like it's almost like there, but it's like we need just like a little something. But I don't know exactly what it is. I'm always really torn between, there's a painter named de Kooning, I think it is. He said, paintings are never finished, they're just abandoned. And I really hate that quote because sometimes I do feel that way and sometimes I don't. I really don't know what to think of it. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, are we done here? Are we not done here? There's something that hasn't quite clicked yet. I don't know what it is though. Maybe it's the beard. Maybe we need to do something with the beard. In fact, that's what my intuition is telling me. What my intuition is telling me is that I should do this. I'm going to get some color in here. Not color. I'm going to wet this. Maybe just tone it a tiny bit. And I'm toning. I'm not toning. I'm making the fibers in the beard wet. I'm wetting the paper in the beard. Because I'm going to come in and I want to really subtly throw in a texture in the beard. I think this is a good idea. Let's just see what happens if I come up. Yeah, perfect. I wish this was kind of like fractaling and fuzzing out a little bit more, but maybe it's good. Because now we're kind of bringing this texture down here. Perfect. And those little blooms on the top where I'm picking up the pen are kind of unexpected, but they look kind of cool. Maybe I'll do from the top in the other blue. That's what I'm going to do actually right now. Nice. Perfect. This one might be really dark. I'm going to lighten up that dark one. Otherwise, though, that was a really interesting call. Perfect. Perfect. Man, that looks really sick. I really like those dots. I'm kind of wondering if I should do that again. I'm kind of wondering if I should do that one more time. And just bring the bottom up here. I'm going to do it one more time. But I'm going to leave those up there. I'm going to come in with the other blue color. I'm going to come in with the Prussian blue. I don't know if this will even read. It might be. Oh, dude, this is such a good call. The paper's so wet, it's almost like hardly taking the lines in the bottom. But then it's also fuzzing out a lot more. Yeah, that looks really tight. And I'm going to do one more at the bottom. Perfect. Oh, dude, the colors. Working with color is so cathartic. So cathartic, man. If you're stressed out, just buy some cheap paints, honestly. You really, really should do it. You don't have to show anybody what you make or anything. I really think that was the move. See, now it's way more visually interesting here. Yeah. Yeah. I think what I'm going to do is tighten up this back of the box here, and then we'll see where we're at. I'm really not pleased with how the Viridian was rolling on this picture, so I'm even going to make it a little bit darker and thus bring some of the colors of the Prophet outside back here. Let's see, maybe I can just come up like this. I'm going to fuzz that out a little bit. I mean, I could fix the line, but I kind of like that it's imperfect. I'm just going to come down here. Perfect. Yeah. It's almost how I want it, but maybe I should just lean in and make this really dark. Where his hand is touching, almost like it's like super dark there. Yeah, that looks good. Come up here. Whoa, I hit the camera, my bad. I have to move the light around a little bit because the angle of the light affects what you are getting the reflection in. There we go, that's perfect. Move this up a tiny bit. Interesting, interesting. I really like this. But there's little tweaks. So this is a good fruit of watching the show for you. I mean, this happens to me all the time, but sometimes I say the difference between a good work of art and a great work of art is very small. But the difference between a great work of art and a masterpiece is just one or two decisions. It's very, very small. Sorry, the difference between good art and great art is huge. But then the difference between great art and incredible art is like that much. That's what the saying is, whether or not that's true. And we're not going to make a masterpiece here, but I think that you might see what a few little decisions change things. Maybe that was one of them, but I think right here, I think also just darkening this up. I think adding a little darkness back here. It's going to add some visual interest. I think some darkness back here. It's going to add some visual interest. One thing I do when I'm doing this is I almost look at it and I almost let my eyes kind of like fuzz out a little bit, honestly. And I really look at the whole thing as a whole. It's almost like you can forget what you're actually painting and just look at it as like blobs and forms. Like you totally can forget that it's a halo and a face and a book. You just kind of like blur your eyes a little bit and just look at it as though it is just a bunch of colors arranged together in shapes. And that really does clarify things sometimes. Because even doing that right now, I think that I should add a little bit of the same like fade up. Same kind of like a little bit of a fade right here. Inside the halo. Yeah, perfect. Same thing here. Perfect. Nice. That might be it. I'm tempted to do something down here, but I don't want to mess it up too much. I don't want to affect the natural balance that we landed at. Maybe something like this is the way to go. Yeah, I think what I was responding to is there's too much contrast between this purple and this light area. So now we kind of fix that. Whoa, I just dropped my lamp. It's really funny, actually. That's never happened before. Okay. I think this looks pretty solid. Okay, nice. Okay, I'm going to grab the piece of the lamp that just fell, put it back, we'll decide if we're done, and then that's the deal. In case anyone was really wondering, since you made it all the way to the end of the show, I didn't tighten the C-clamp by which the lamp is affixed to the desk in the beginning, because I wanted to keep things moving, and then that didn't really work out. It's not a big deal. Boom. I think we're good, though. This is a good one. This is a good one. Okay, let's see. Anything else in the chat? No. Okay, I'm going to move these paints so we can see as it really is. It's 8:30. It's like the exact normal ending time. Not that anyone but me cares. Let's see. Let's see on its own. We can see it without the palette next to it. Move some stuff around here. Oh, perfect. Okay, I'm going to look away for a second, and then we'll make the call if it's done or not. See any other questions in the chat? Owen, are you excited to be a father? Any paternal art to look forward to? It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, obviously I think we'll get some kind of baby art in the store, not to be too pandery, but I am going to make some baby clothes now because I want my baby to have some crazy baby clothes. But also, I mean, there is something really like oddly spiritual and stuff about like, you know, pregnancy, developing life, and things like that. So yeah, I mean, naturally that'll get reflected in my art. Everything about my life gets reflected in there. And also in terms of archetypes, you know, we talk about archetypes so much on the show, but I guess I really am becoming the father archetype at some point. I was sitting in my car. It's the last sort of outro I guess we'll talk about. I was sitting in my car, and I thought, I jokingly turned to my wife and I said, you know, we have 10 years before the kid is 10 years old. And like we both laughed, and then I thought, wow, actually that's crazy. I thought, what, in 10 years I'm going to have a 10-year-old. I mean, God willing, hopefully. But I was like, wow, that's like a long amount of time for me to prep in a weird way. You know, and I was really thinking about that. It's funny, it started as a joke, but it wasn't. So yeah, that'll probably get reflected in my art. Okay, let's wrap it up. I think this looks great. You know what I say every time? I feel like we should recap, but you were just here. Really successful thing that happened here is the interplay between the warm and cool colors. I talked about that right in the beginning, but I think that really went really well. You can see also, this is an interesting thing about color that I don't think we've ever talked about on the show, but for some reason, I've really thought about it a lot. I don't know if it has to do with how humans categorize color, or our eyes, or the nature of colors and things like that, but you can really see up here in the angel, the difference between red and orange and yellow is so large. Those are like different worlds. Red, orange, yellow. Their whole universe is really. But for some reason, you don't get the same difference between green and blue and purple. They really are closer together. They really, really are. And I don't know why. You can see the green to blue. It doesn't, I mean, maybe it could be the way I painted it. You know, I probably could have done it differently. But, you know, this range and this color up here is really just so different to me than the range of greens and stuff. Pigment probably has a little bit to do with it. You know, the red, orange, and yellow here are the cadmium pigments. They're so powerful. Whereas the main green pigment here is viridian. You can even see it's kind of like a transparent pigment, so maybe it doesn't carry the same weight. Just an interesting little note here. Anyway, though, I think this is a good one. This is a really good show. I really like talking to you guys about all this stuff, honestly. So, that's the deal. We did not solve the problem of if God, real, why bad thing happened. We did not solve the problem of why the fall happened. We did not solve the problem of if God knows everything, then doesn't he know what we're going to do? And how does free will play into a universe? If God created things out of nothing, doesn't he then create all the conditions under which we act, and then we don't have free will? Actually, maybe we should just become Calvinists, but that can't be real because I have free will. We didn't solve all those problems in the 90 minutes of the show. My bad. We will solve them all next week. But now we return. You know the deal. Now we return to the battlefield, the spiritual chessboard on which we all move as pawns. This was a nice break, but now we go back to it. I hope you had a good time. I have a really good time hanging out with you guys. We're going to have an outro eventually. We don't have one yet. And that's the show. I will catch you guys on the internet where we all hang out together. A sincere thank you for coming through. And we're out. See you guys later.